Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Uncommon Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Apprille. This week's guest is a good friend of mine. He performs all over the globe, performs for the troops. You've seen him on David Letterman. You've seen him on all sorts of shows. He's been everywhere, Comedy Central, Bob and Tom, Sirius XM, you name it, he's done it. Very, very funny. He's an Emmy-winning comedy writer. And we're very, very lucky to have him here. So please bring in my friend, Steve Mazan. What's up, Steve?
Hey, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well, bud. How are you doing?
Good. And happy belated birthday, right? What are we a day or two away from?
Yesterday, yeah. One day. So one day.
Yesterday. Hey, just to get us started, my dog has a trick. For some reason, I didn't teach her the trick. She barks if you sing only happy birthday. So I'm going to sing happy birthday for you, and she's going to join me. Watch it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Brian. Happy birthday to you.
Hey, that was awesome.
She wanted to. I was like, look, it was yesterday. We missed it. And she's like, no, we should still do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's cool. I always like to start by talking a little bit like how I met my guest or when I've seen the guest. And I don't exactly remember when I met you, but I remember seeing your act. And the thing I love about your act is it's very smart. It's very funny. You have great facial expressions.
Oh, thank you.
And you make me laugh out loud. You had a joke that I won't say because it's a clean show back in the day. You're a pretty clean comic anyway.
Yeah.
But you had a bit about going to see the Harry Potter movie and the person behind you was talking and
there was a little kid behind me. I could give you the clean version. There's a little kid behind me, and it was like watching the Harry Potter, and it was me and like 700 kids. And at the one point, there's the mean adopted dad, if you've seen the movies, and he's like, he'll never go back to that Hogwarts school again. And this little girl behind me in the theater stood up on her chair and she yelled at the screen, and she was like, "Oh yes, he will!" And it was just, it was so cute and adorable. And I turned around and I was like, "Shut the heck up!" I did not pay $10 to listen to you talk through the whole movie. That was the gist of it. So,
that one, I love that joke.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love the two words I love most is when a fan comes up or someone who likes your comedy, if they say smart and silly, that's what I aim for. Those are because they seem so different that I love when those cross paths.
Yeah, they're great, and you have a great style, and people should definitely follow you if they can. At Steve Mazan, Mazan on Instagram, and Twitter is at Steve_Mazan.
Yes,
that's your middle name. Is underscore Steve_Mazan. There it is. So now, what inspired you to start doing comedy? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Danger's my middle name.
I'm sorry. What was that one?
I said my middle name is Danger. I think that's right.
That's true.
People always use that in movies where they're like, "Danger's my middle name." Like, wouldn't you rather have the guy whose first name is Danger? Wouldn't that be the better guy? Or
absolutely.
Like, why are you bearing the danger if your middle name is
So then, would it be like Danger Steve?
Danger
Bond?
Danger April.
Yeah. It's Danger Bob April.
Ooh.
Bob is my middle name.
There's got to be a comedian whose stage name is Danger, right?
I would think so.
I mean, obviously, we have Rodney Dangerfield, but
right.
Where it's just, we know Gary Cannon. That's a stage name. There's got to be a Danger out there somewhere.
Yeah, people ask me if my last name's a stage name, and it's not.
Yeah, no, I can see that because it sounds like it just because it's got such a nice ring to it and that. But if you see the spelling, it would be weird if you went with April and then added letters. Right? Yeah,
I was like, well, why would I have a stage name that people can't spell and people can't pronounce? Right. That's the opposite. The opposite.
I'm going with the stage name Danger, but it's spelled with a Q.
Exactly.
You can't find me. Yeah.
It's DAJ.
Yeah.
Danger. Yeah, that's so weird. So, what inspired you to start doing stand-up?
This is going to seem so strange, but it actually, I think, speaks a little bit to the times we're living in right now. I grew up in the Midwest. As you can tell, despite my bad lighting, I am a Midwest white guy. Polish, Irish, German, about as white as you can get. And my heroes growing up were all black. Walter Payton was my sports hero growing up in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And when I was 12 years old, less than 12 years old, probably 11 or 12, my mom came home and announced we got cable. And I was like, are we rich? It was a big deal. Everyone has cable now. But at that time, only my rich friends had cable. And so that night it came on. I remember we watched, it was around Christmas, and we watched, there was a Rich Little comedy special. It was like him doing A Christmas Carol. Okay. And so Johnny Carson was Bob Cratchit. His, Ava Gabor was Mrs. Cratchit, that kind of thing. So he played every role. It was pretty funny. But we watched that together, and my mom was like, okay, time to go to bed, because I had school, I think, the next day. And so we went to bed, but then I came back out in the living room and turned the cable back on, and Richard Pryor Live was on, that comedy special. And I had seen, Richard Pryor in a movie before. I had seen comedians on Johnny Carson before who do 5 minutes or something like that. But all of a sudden, here was a guy talking for an hour and a half, just literally about his life and making it funny. And I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that was an option for your life, that you could do that. But again, it seemed like the guys who were comedians on Johnny Carson just showed up, and I didn't know that there were clubs that they worked and that kind of thing. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I want to do that. I want to be able to do that for a living. They showed this crowd. It was an obvious, a theater of thousands of people. And so, yeah, that's what inspired me, that special. And I was like, someday I'm going to do comedy. Now it took me another 20 years to get the cojones to right. But from that moment, that's when I said, I want to be a comedian.
Huh. So Richard Pryor, were there any other stand-up comedians that you ended up liking? And
yeah, it did. That goes to the point that I'm talking about. My comedy is nothing like Richard Pryor's. It's not racial, and people consider me generally a clean comedian. It's silly. But it was just but yeah, I think he's all those things too. I mean, he's silly, he's very smart, that kind of thing, but it's just, there'd be no comparison. Yes, I fell in love with David Letterman. Was the reason that I started watching him, because that made me fall in love with comedy, the Richard Pryor. And then after Johnny Carson, because my parents would watch, Johnny Carson, after him came on David Letterman around the same time. So it was a kind of a formative early 80s years. I would stay up a little later, watch him, and again, it was supposed to be in bed. And David Letterman was on, and he'd have on different comedians. And first of all, Dave was funny. He wasn't. Right. He was from the Midwest. He had a gap in his teeth. He looked, he wasn't Johnny Carson. He didn't seem smooth. He didn't seem he wore gym shoes, and khakis, and he just seemed more laid back. He was from Indiana, right next door, a Midwest guy. So all of a sudden, it just felt like, more me. It was like a little bit of the Richard Pryor had grown up in Illinois. So maybe there was a Midwest angle to all this too. But so I fell in love with David Letterman, and I fell in love with, he had different comedians on too. You know what I mean? Guys who were not the usual, Playboy Club act kind of thing. These guys were turning comedy on its head. It seems silly because he's so mainstream now, but Jay Leno, Andy Kaufman, those guys, Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright made his debut on Carson, but all those guys, Bill Hicks, I'm forgetting the big Sam Kinison. Sam Kinison's David Letterman appearance is one of my favorites. So it was that kind of thing. That's what made me want to do it. The inspiration was Pryor, and then the realization that, oh my God, there's so many people doing this that you could really do it was from David Letterman and wanting to get on that.
It's funny.
That's the right thing. I will be on the David Letterman show one day. That was seeing Richard Pryor play to a theater seemed ridiculous. He was a movie star as well. But watching David Letterman and seeing these comics on, that seemed attainable. That seemed like, okay, I might be able to do this someday. I'm not going to sell out. You have to be famous to do what Richard Pryor does. But I didn't know when Sam Kinison came on the first time. I didn't know who he was. I him in a movie. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I think I could be funny for 5 minutes eventually.
Which is so not the way. We'll get into that because you actually did get on the David Letterman show. We'll get into that in a bit. But it's funny that you mentioned, Richard Pryor was your influence. Mine was Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
His Delirious album and his the one before that, Eddie Murphy Comedian, was like, it's filthy, but it's, you're however old you are and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But I started watching, I think when I was like 10, watching stand-up comedy. And then when I hit 13, I was allowed to watch some more risque special, not from my parents, but from my brother was like, okay, you're 13 here, you can and he's like showed me like Buddy Hackett and all these these filthy
things you shouldn't be. Thank God for older brothers and uncles and those guys and dads who listen to their wives, that slide you to those things you shouldn't be watching.
But watching Eddie Murphy and him, weaving in and out of impressions and all of that was like, oh, that's so cool, and so that totally inspired me. And then I just fell in love with so many comics like Paul Poundstone and Louis Anderson and just that whole early group of comedians during the boom. So that was
100%. I still love those guys. I mean, it's fun. Even when I'm friends now, you make friends with some comedian and then they're a guy that's been around for a long time or something, and I see like Louis Anderson commented on my friend's thing, and I'm like one person from Louis Anderson. Like, I grew up with Louis Anderson. I watched, his cartoon. I watched, all this stuff. It's
I love Louis. He was such a hey, he's got that nice, lovable Minnesota personality. So, do you remember your first stand-up show? What was finally the impetus to go, I'm doing this?
Yes.
What was that first show?
I went after school. Like I said, I didn't have the cojones to do it, but I knew I wanted to. In the back of my head, the kind of growing up in the Midwest, it wasn't a share your dreams. We're living in a much more shared society, which I think is good. But you kept this stuff to yourself, and it was always in the back of my head that I wanted to do this. I went in the Navy after high school. Then college after the Navy. And then so I was in my late 20s and I moved out to California because my sister was living in the Bay Area up near San Francisco. And she had 2 kids and I wasn't going to have kids anytime soon. So I moved out there to kind of see them grow up. And 2 months after I moved out there, her husband got a job back in Chicago. And so they all packed up and moved back. And I was like stuck out here alone. So I was like, do I move back to Chicago or do I stay here? And so I decided to stay. And I had heard that San Francisco had a great comedy scene. I knew Rob Williams was from there. I knew Jake Johansson was from there, from all the comedy specials. He said that we paid attention to then. And so I started looking into it and found an open mic scene. And I took a comedy class. And I eventually was like, okay, I'm going to go do it. And I went out and there was a place called the Brainwash Comedy or Brainwash Laundry Cafe. And they had a comedy night. So it was a laundromat that just had like a great, they had great food though. It was crazy. So I went, I was an idiot. So I showed up in like a sport coat and, like at the 1980s comic, sport coat, jeans. I went in after work. I had a day job. So I drove into the city afterwards, terrible traffic, got into the city and, I think sign up was at 6, but the show started at 8. So I had a full day. I get there. I was the first one there. I sign up. I was smart enough somehow. I was like, don't sign up first. Let someone else go because you're going to be nervous. And so I signed up, I think, 2nd or 3rd. And I was like, okay, great. The show starts at 8. I'll be up by 8:20 the latest after the host, I guess. 8:30. I'll stay for a couple comics. I should be home by 9:30 or so in bed, since I had a long day. I had to wake up. It was a Tuesday, so I had to wake up the next day for work. And so I signed up 3rd, and then the guy came in, around 7:30. Tony Sparks was his name, and he still runs a show up there. And he goes, oh, who's this Steve Mazan? Or Mazan. He pronounced my last name wrong. And I go, that's me. And he looked me up and down. And he's like, this guy looks stupid. And he goes, you ever done it? And I go, no, it's my first we're gonna move you down a little. We're gonna let some other people go, blah, blah, blah. And so I end up going. I didn't go on till 11 o'clock
Oh man.
That night, it just kept getting bump further. I was looking over, and he'd be like, "Oh, so and so just showed up. Like, we're gonna put him up first." There was a time during that show where it was packed. I mean, people from the neighborhood came, and it was, and I say packed, there was probably like 30 audience members and 20 comedians, which would make for a great show.
Right.
And there was 15 or 20 people who were literally doing laundry and folding and listening. And by the time I got up, it was me, the comic who had just gone, Tony, who ran the room, and then the guy who was running the cafe, and he was cleaning stuff up. And then one lady was folding her laundry, but really not watching. So she was really the only audience member. And then just the rest of us. And I went up, I got one laugh. I remember from the guy who was cleaning up, who worked there. He laughed at something. And I walked off, and the host said something nice to me, and the other guy said something. And I walked off, and I swear to you, Brian, as I walked to my car, even though I had to drive home an hour now to my place and get up the next morning, it was going to be after midnight by the time I got home. I had to get back up at 6 for work. As I walked to my car, I did one of those Judd Nelson, like that I had done it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, well, you did it. You had said you've been saying for 20 years you're going to do this, and you finally did it. And I was like, yeah. As I went to my car, sorry, I'm all sweaty, and I was like, well, it's probably about 3-4 months till I'm on the Tonight Show, where it's David Letterman. This will move quickly at this point. I was obviously way off, but I was so excited just to have done it. It didn't matter how it went that first time.
Yeah, that 11 p.m., 3 people there, and you're hooked.
Yes. Yeah. There's electricity in the air, and it wasn't just the static cling from the laundry.
That's so crazy. That's so you just kept going back and then
my thing then was to I had luckily had a day job that I didn't have to worry about money or anything. I had a car that helped in San Francisco a lot, so people would find out, a lot of people who lived in the city didn't have cars. And so when they found out someone who did have a car, they'd be like, oh, if you'll drive to this gig, I'll get you stage time on it. So I just started taking everything anyone would offer me. I would keep track on my desk at work each day. I had like one of those giant, desk calendars, with every day. And I would keep track of how many sets I did each week. I think my record was 19 sets one week I got in. But yeah, I would take any stage time I could. And it took a while to get your footing and feel like you knew what you were doing. But that's what everyone's advice was, just that. Just keep getting up on stage. There's no substitute for that. And I just still think that's the best advice you can give. Yeah.
Well, besides the whole like just get up, what do you think what is the best piece of advice you got besides that?
Outside of that?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, because it is always the one I say. I mean, don't be hard on yourself. I mean, the stage time is just really invaluable because it's a foreign thing. People say it's the thing they're most afraid of is speaking to strangers, and that's what we decide to do for a living. And so that's why it's so valuable just to get up. Because and learn that, subconsciously, even if you're dying, even if it's a coffee house and no one's listening to what you say, you being on stage is valuable because you get used to it at some level. Then, I think, probably the other thing would be patient. Try not to compare yourself to others. That's the hardest part, of course. So that's probably, I would say the second best advice I could think of. Don't compare yourself to others. There's guys. I remember one of the guys I started with. I was probably two or 3 years in San Francisco then, and this young kid. I don't want to say his name just because someone says something in this story says something disparaging about him. But they're like, "Hey, Brian, that guy Brian is terrible. He's been doing it for 2 years, and he's just awful." He was like, he was going to school in SF State, and but my buddy was like, "He's just not getting any better." I was like, "No, it's not." And then just like after 3 years, like he still had another year. And then just after 3 years, something just clicked. And all of a sudden he was unstoppable. And and there was no sign of that before. There's guys you can see like up for 5 minutes and you're like, not good. And then something all of a sudden they just tap into something like a little laugh here or a style. And you're like, oh, okay, he's on to something. There was no sign of that for this guy for 3 years. And then just all of a sudden, everything came together and it clicked, and he was young and he was good looking, but none of this stuff you would have even given him credit for before that, because there was no sign that he was funny. And then again, so yeah, don't be hard on yourself, because everyone learns at a different level, and it's you can't tell what you're learning is half of it.
Right.
You know, like you and I go out to play catch baseball or something. You teach your son to throw a ball or something. You can see that he's getting better. There isn't that in comedy. Like there is no practice. You only get to learn it by doing it, and you can't tell because every audience is different if you're really learning or not. So it's hard.
Yeah, I remember when I felt like things clicked for me the first time. I can still tell you where I was. I was in Lewiston, Maine, and it was like I was on a stage, and I could still tell you the layout of the bar and the club and all of that sort of stuff. And then I was up there, and then something, and I was like, oh, I get it, you know. Yeah. And then since then, it was like, you know, as long as the room's remotely set up for comedy and people are remotely there for comedy, then usually, you know, the inconsistency, starts to, you know, you start to just go up more, you know, the inconsistency kind of stays away, and you get it. So what about
anything you can grab, though, that you can say this is what happened in that moment, or it's just all of a sudden?
I think it was just the matter of time of just being up there, up there. It's just those repetitions, and then you kind of get that muscle memory or whatever. And then, you know, because especially if you're really analytical about your comedy and you sit there and go, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Why are they not laughing? They're always, you know, if you record yourself and you listen back and go, all right, they're always laughing here, but this is inconsistent, and this one never gets a laugh. And so, like, you just start looking for the puzzle pieces of why is this working? Why is that working? What am I doing with my face? What am I doing with my hands? What am I doing with my body? How am I saying it? You know, my gosh, you know, all the things of what's funnier, bum, butt, you know, hiney, glutes, you know, all of the different word choices that you can use or whatever. And then with all of those, the timing, the phrasing, the emphasis, the physicality, all of that. So I couldn't tell you exactly what it was, but that kind of, you know, that clicked. So when did things kind of click for you?
You know, I think my first thing was that I remember like that. It seemed like more of a gradual kind of thing. Like slowly, I just seemed to be getting a little more laughs and stuff. It's hard to play one moment, but if there had to be one moment, I remember writing my first closer, you know what I mean? Where I wrote something that I got so confident in because it worked the first time I told it. It worked great, and then I quickly realized no matter how the set went before that, and before I made it the closer, if I tried to go after it, it didn't matter after it. That joke always worked. It just didn't matter if the audience was half paying attention or whatever. It just all of a sudden that I had one joke, and that confidence that came to me with knowing that I have that in my pocket. So even if I'm dying I get a 5-minute set, I'm dying for 4 minutes. That confidence I had in the back of my head is like, all right, I know that they'll love this. That allowed me to not care as much about the first 4 minutes and relax a little bit. Whereas had I not, when I didn't have that in my back pocket, it was just a little panic, like, whoa, what about this?
Right.
What about this? You know, but knowing that there was one that, okay, this baby always works, that helped me so much. So that was a big thing. Like, again, and then you have the building blocks, right? Then you got to find an opener that can bookend it. So you can start strong and end strong. But yeah, so there's weird stuff like that. That's a great piece of advice, as you said. Be analytical, because those are the things you should be analytical about your own set, so that you can figure those things out.
Yeah, it's and for those who aren't necessarily comedians, a closer is your final joke, your last bit of materials that closes your set. Opener is obviously what opens your set, and like you said, I remember those days when you don't have a closer, and you're just like, because you always want to leave on a laugh. That's you can get nothing for 4.5 minutes, and if you can get a laugh, and you just go, I'm out, and it just But when you try and you and your closer is supposed to be your best joke, essentially, and then you do your best joke and it gets nothing. There's nothing worse than having that last joke get nothing, and you go, Well, I was hoping to go out on a laugh with that one.
I got nowhere else. That
is the worst feeling. You just slink off a stage like nothing worked.
That's I could do, and you didn't like it.
Yeah, it's terrible. But thankfully, it's those days are the hardest part is always the beginning of comedy, and then I always tell people like that is the hardest part. I mean, there's always levels that you can go up, but in the beginning, you just have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea why you say this thing and it turns the audience against you, and you have no idea where, And then like once you figure that out, you're like, okay, at least.
Right.
So
it is. It's those things because again, it's because you can't practice it, because you can only do it doing it
right
in the live audience that the stakes are just as real. It doesn't matter. That it's at a comedy club or a coffee house or anything like that. The rejection is the same.
Right.
At all places, it feels just as bad. So you can hypothesize. You can be analytical after your set about what worked and what didn't. But anything before, it's all a hypothesis that you're like, I wonder if in between jokes I could do this or I could say this to the audience. But you don't know. You could say that thing that you think in writing is like, this will get them to like me and come to me. And it could have the complete opposite effect. And you don't know till you do it. That's the fun of comedy is it's immediate. But it's also the rejection is immediate.
Yeah, and it's true because the audience doesn't know you're practicing. Like they're expecting Freebird. You know what I mean? Like they're expecting that. This isn't your first time trying to play a chord.
Yeah.
So it's such a weird dynamic. What is your writing process like?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. It used to be when you start, you have no material because you're not a comic. So
right.
I used to write at that time when I started a half hour a day, just free write. And it didn't have to be funny, but I would attempt to make funny, but you had to start writing at one point and a half hour later you could stop. And so, a lot of it was gibberish, but good stuff came out of that. Eventually, you start crafting stuff or at least you're editing yourself on the fly where you're like, nope, this will work better this way as you're writing it stuff. So it helped with the writing process. But once I got, I think probably 15 or 20 minutes of material, and I don't mean that like a young comic because young comics are always like, I got 15 or 20 minutes of material. That means I had 2 good minutes probably.
Yep.
Maybe 2 minutes. I'm probably overestimating it. None of those jokes I do now. That's how bad they are. But at that time, they were the best 2 minutes I had.
Right.
And besides that, I had written 18 other minutes that I could throw out there. That didn't mean I had 20 minutes of material, but that's what I had written. And so, to that point, I probably started at that point because then I could do different 5-minute sets at least, attempt these things. So then I would probably start, writing more on inspiration at that point rather than the put it down kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that probably took, I would think probably a year and a half to get to that point where I stopped the free writing. And then I would write maybe once a week. I would sit with some friends and we'd write and shoot ideas and that kind of thing. But then it started to become more inspiration where I would notice something and I would put it down then at any time where it wasn't scheduled. You're going to write for this amount of time. It was more like, that's funny. Write it down either as an idea or why was it funny and figure it out and try and reverse engineer it. Or if, me and Brian were talking and we started cracking up and then we decided who gets to keep this.
Yep.
And then I went back to my book and I wrote it down and was like, okay, because that's the difference, right? Everyone always says there's a funny guy at my work. Yeah, there's the funny guy at work's probably he may be funnier than me at your work, but his stuff at work doesn't transfer to the stage. That's the trick of the comedian is taking the thing that's funny and bring it to 300 strangers who don't know you, who don't work with you, who don't have the inside joke of it all, who don't know you all, who you walk out on the stage and they don't know you. They haven't worked with you for 3 years, so they know your sense of humor already. You have to walk up naked and get them to like you and laugh at you. That's what a comedian is. That's the trick. That's the difference. It was that just kind of so. And I still today. So yeah, that was probably like I said, maybe a year and a half, 2 years into it when I stopped writing specifically for it, and just go more by inspiration. And I probably the amount I put out is probably equal to that. But it comes throughout the day now versus sitting down for something and doing it that way.
Now, you also ended up, spoiler alert, writing for the Ellen DeGeneres Show.
Yes.
But that you have to have content every day.
Yes.
So what is the difference between kind of walking around and getting inspiration versus, hey, we're talking about, the monkeys that escape the zoo?
Yes. Yeah. That's it. It's an influx of exactly that. And so you're instead of me sitting down a half hour a day, I was sitting down 8 to 12 hours a day in an office on the Warner Brothers lot. And then it's you trying to overflow yourself with inspiration. You had your computer on your desk, open up to Yahoo and the news sites. You had a TV in your room so that you could have the news on to keep up on topical stuff and just what's happening. You had to be on social media so you know what's trending, what are people talking about. Anytime you see 30 Rock or the old Dick Van Dyke Show, that kind of thing, there's a hallway and someone's got a scooter and they're playing tennis and stuff. Anything that just can spark you, keep you talking with someone and spark something, and it's just tossing out ideas. There wasn't enough of that. That's the one thing I didn't like about Ellen's show specifically. It was much more, you were given an assignment, go write a monologue, and you would go back to your room and you'd write by yourself. Whereas my favorite thing from being a comedian, I think, that it's my favorite part. It's you and I do a show together, and then me, you, and our friend Lee Levine, we go, and Gary, we go we eat and we laugh for an hour, and
right?
Probably come up with 4 or 5 new bits each because we're like, oh my god, that's hilarious! You want that? I want that.
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
Yeah, Brian, you're like, hey, Steve, you did a new. Is that new? Yeah. Oh, you should say this after that. You know what I mean? It's that bouncing stuff off. So I think most writers' rooms, like I said, Ellen was particularly a different thing in that. But I think that's what most writers' rooms end up being is a group exercise like that where you're working with others and you come up with this. That's a great idea, but what about this? Oh, right. That's hilarious. What about this? And so you might even be so far from your original idea, but it's the bouncing it off each other that they could. And so that's why it's there are so many inputs, things to inspire you, hopefully, or keep you up on the day's news or whatever's happening.
Yeah, and that's why it's good to have a circle of comedy friends, I think. Especially it's easier now with all the inventions and cell phones and internet and email and all that and texting. But starting out when internet's not really a big thing or anything like that, it gets hard because, as once you start going up, like we used to do shows all the time together. Because we're newer, we're lower on the food chain, right. So we can all be on the same show. But as you start going up and you start featuring, you start headlining, you don't stack multiple headliners.
Be on the same show.
Yeah, and so it's like you don't get to see each other as much, and so you don't get that camaraderie, and you don't get the bouncing of the ideas as much. So it's always nice. We used to do a show called the Hot Monkey Love Cafe, and you
loved it.
And it was Dwayne Perkins, who's the national headliner, yourselves, national headliner, Lee Levine, Gary Cannon, all these people who are just amazing headliners. And we would just go have a ball. And then, we're all like, okay, well, now we're off to the Improv, or we're off to DC, or we're off to so it's good to have a clique of people because you get to enjoy some of those fun shows. And kind of leads me into my next question. We always talk about the fun shows, but what we really have fun with are what are the worst shows? What is the worst show you've ever had? Because there's nothing funnier to other comics than watching a comic that they know is good absolutely just die on stage.
I've got so many of us. Denise was with me, my wife Denise. She was with me, and we were in San Francisco. This is probably 5 years ago now, and I was doing some radio, and it was one of those places. You ever been in a radio place where they've got like 4 stations? Like as a kid, I always remember like WKRP. You thought it was in a building. It was one. But there's always like some center, and it's actually like 6 or 7 radio stations all sharing the same area. So I was having fun on one show, and then like a couple other shows were like, hey, would you come on my show next? Would you come on? So I eventually ended up on some sports show. And it was like the 3rd one I was on that morning. And Denise was in the studio with me, just standing in the background. And the guy goes, hey, tell me about your worst show, like ever. And I was like, okay. And I'm thinking, he goes, oh, are you one of those guys That's you never have a bad show. You're going to complain. You never die. And like Denise and I looked at each other and just started busting out laughing because she knew that what I was thinking about was like, no, there's so many. I don't know which one to tell you about. Like which is the worst. So her and I had the conversation like on the drive back from San Francisco, and I think this still holds up as my worst. I was hired to do stand-up comedy. Actually, I did this twice, but they're both bad. But at a minor league baseball game.
Oh no!
Yes, it was out in Riverside, which isn't a fancy area in the first place. And they have I think it was called the Quakes, are the name of their team. And the Improv was partnering with them. So the manager at the Improv said, "Hey, Steve, you're a clean comedian. Would you come and do this thing? They want to do a cross promotional thing. And the idea will be you'll do stand-up comedy in between each inning. So as the each inning switching and the players are running back out, you'll just go and you'll do it on the dugout. You'll stand on the home team's dugout and do stand-up comedy." Now,
my stomach's already in my throat. I'm just dying already.
Yeah, it had disaster written all over it. But I was a young comic. I was stupid. I wanted the Improv jersey. They said they'd give me an Improv jersey, and I could eat free food at the ballpark. And I can't even remember if there was money involved because it was at the time where I might have just done it for the experience. And Gary Cannon, our mutual friend, which was a big mistake here, I brought him with. They said you could bring someone. And as you talk about, there's nothing more fun for comedians to laugh at other comedians dying. And probably the worst comic you would want there is Gary Cannon for it, because he's one of these people that has that laugh that is unmistakable when he's laughing at someone else's pain, and it just twists the blade in your back, kind of thing. So I went up after the first inning, and I jump up on the dugout and I start talking. Well, half the crowd doesn't even know where I'm at. They don't put me on a scoreboard, and it's a minor league game. So it's just my voice coming out over the thing already, and people are doing it. And the people who can see me they're like, "This is stupid. This is awful." Maybe there's one person smiling, and the only laughing I heard for that whole probably did like 2 minutes in between each inning, and they finally pulled the plug like the 7th inning. They're like, "We're not going to do it for the 8th and or after the 9th, which was originally the plan." They pulled the plug because it was so bad. But I remember the only laugh I ever heard was Gary's laugh from the back, just him going, "Ah! Ah!" just laughing that it was going so poorly. And at one point, probably like the 4th or 5th inning, the home team guy, the pitcher, was getting shelled. He wasn't doing well, and I wasn't doing well. I was bombing. I was doing worse than him. And so he was coming off, and I just thought, well, all right, you're struggling. You're trying to do anything. Like you were saying, like maybe I'll try this.
Yep.
So I started thinking maybe I would do crowd work, and so I did it. I talked to maybe one guy, and that got more than nothing. And then I saw the team coming in from the field, and I was like, "Oh, hey, here's the starting pitcher, everyone." Blah blah blah. And I won't give it to you, but he gave me the third, and I'm crushed because the starting pitcher now is flipping me off in front of everyone, and then of course all I hear is, "Woo!" Gary's laugh in the back, and it was awful. It was a tough one.
Oh, that's so painful.
Yeah, so that I think, and again, there's a plethora to choose from, but I think that would be the one to hold up as the worst. Yeah.
And people wonder why comics are jaded and cynical and bitter, and it's so funny. Talking with Steve Mazan, you can check out his website, stevemazan.com. That's STEVEMAZAN.com. Again, you can follow him on Instagram at Steve Mazan and Twitter at Steve_Mazan. So what advice do you have for, we kind of talked about this for new comics, like what's the biggest mistake you always see them, doing?
Yeah, I think it really is expecting them, their expectation that they're going to be good. It's you see someone else and you think they're just a funny person. I remember getting the chance to talk with Brian Regan about comedy, who was my favorite comedian. If people don't know him, look him up. If you asked 100 comedians who their favorite comedian is, probably half of them would say Brian Regan. He's just fantastic. And I talked to him about this. There's an idea when you see someone funny, you just think, well, they're just funny. They're just great. They're always been like that. That there was no learning curve for him or for Richard Pryor or for Robin Williams. That, they were hilarious people and they stepped on stage and they were this great right away. And Brian Regan was like, I got a tape from 3 years ago that'll show you differently. Like, he'd been in the business 20 years by that time. So the point he was trying to make is like, no, it's the same problem. We all go through that first few years. I'm not a huge Dane Cook comedy fan, but he has one of the greatest comedy quotes of all time. And it's he said, I wouldn't wish the first 7 years of stand-up comedy on my worst enemy. So that's a guy that's incredibly successful and is saying that about his enemy. He wouldn't wish that on. So I think that's part of it. Is again, there was me leaving the laundromat, be like, yeah, I'm gonna be on the Tonight Show in 3 months, that kind of thing. Just know it's a process. Just know you're going to be terrible for a while. There's going to be lots up and downs. You got to get used to the rejection. It's a learning curve, and it's very easy as you jump in. You're hanging around other people that are very good at it because they still go to open mics. They still go to these shows to practice, to do what they can. So it's easy to all of a sudden be like, oh, they're great and I'm not. And you give yourself, be forgiving because it's a long road to figure it out. So that would be my big.
That's great advice. That's really good advice. So let's switch gear. You talked about David Letterman again, and you ended up making a documentary about that process. It was called Dying to Do Letterman. It's a great movie. If you get a chance to see it, you should definitely check it out. Tell us a little bit about what started that. What was the cause of that in that process?
So as I mentioned earlier, Dave and his show became, the impetus for like, that was my goal of the getting into stand-up comedy. Once I realized you could do it from seeing Pryor was like that, but seeing Dave's show and being like, that's what I want to be on that show. I want to be there. That's kind of was always in the back of my head. So I started comedy in the late 90s, and about 5 or 6 years in, so it's about 2005, I was actually coming home from a show at the Improv out in the Inland Empire there, and had some pain in my side. I was with Gary Cannon, and I was like, hey, him and I were pigs, so we were probably going to stop to eat on the way home. And I was like, hey, I don't think I can. I got some pain in my side. And then it got worse and worse. And then he had to drive eventually, and I was in the back seat and got home. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she's like, I think you got food poisoning. We've all eaten at comedy clubs, so we know that's probably the good diagnosis. But eventually we end up going to the hospital, and they're like, we think your appendix burst. And so then they say, we're going to do an appendectomy. So they go in. I wake up, and it's a different doctor. And he introduces himself as an oncologist and says, hey, your appendix was fine, but we found tumors all over your liver. We don't know if they're cancerous, but that's where we're starting. We're going to test all this. So after months of tests, and it ended up being stage 4, they found out that it was stage 4 metastatic cancer that spread from my liver to my intestines to my liver. And they gave me.
You just kind of garbled out there for a second. Can you go ahead and repeat what kind it was?
So it was neuroendocrine carcinoid tumors that I had on my liver, and it was stage 4, which means that it had spread from somewhere else. So I went through like a month of tests to figure out where it had come from, and they eventually traced it back to my intestines that I had surgery on to remove that source and stop the spread of it. And the worst case scenario is a rare type of cancer. This they call them NETs for short, but neuroendocrine tumors. And the worst, they said you may only have 5 years to live. I'm not a worst case scenario guy. We're here in 2020 now, talking 15 years later. That didn't come true, but at that point I didn't know, and the doctors who are very smart at UCLA are telling me that's 5 years is the worst case scenario. I asked what the best case was, and they were like, we don't really know. Maybe you could live 10 with this. So again, I'm not a worst case guy, but if someone smart is saying that, you got to consider that. So I started asking myself, how do I want to spend those 5 years? And the big thing that I had realized comedy wise is that I was doing comedy. I was happy with that, but I was kind of, letting things unfold before me. I was going out doing my best, and then people would tell other people, and I'd get work here and here. But I wasn't chasing that original goal, which was to get on the David Letterman show. So that I decided to use whatever time I had left to chase that goal. And so I started, this is going to sound crazy, but this is before Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. I just started a website that was ironically called Dying to Do Letterman. And the idea was that people could go to this website, see my comedy, and then below it, there was a link. If you thought I was good enough, you could send an email to Dave and the people there. And I gave myself a year. That was my original thing, a year to get on Letterman. And a year came and went. There was no way. Eventually, a cease and desist letter came from the people at Letterman. They're like, you're not going to get on the show. It's not happening. Give it up. I think they thought this was like a Make-A-Wish thing, kind of thing. But anyways, it took almost the whole 5 years of the worst case scenario to get their attention, prove to them that I was really a comic and that I was good enough, and to get them the right set to show them like, hey, this I'm good, as good as the not the best person you have on, but I'm as good as any of the people you put on, the young comics that you put on there. So it took a long time to prove it, but that was the goal. A couple here that I was friends with that happened to be filmmakers who had just graduated from UCLA heard about the project. So they very early on started following me, and they're the ones who made the movie Dying to Do Letterman. And then that's on Amazon if you want to see it. It's got a bunch of very funny comedians, Ray Romano, Brian Regan's in there, Kevin Nealon, a bunch of funny people talking about what Letterman meant to them. And then, it kind of follows my journey as well. And it's amazing, but it took 5 years. So I eventually did get on at the end of 2009.
That's awesome. I actually just had Eddie Brill on.
Oh, awesome. Yes.
Yeah. Eddie was the talent coordinator for the comics on Letterman. And I just remember from the movie, Kevin Nealon be like, he's not going to make it. Or whatever.
Not gonna make it. It's my favorite. In fact, I'll tell you a little behind the scenes story. So we interviewed Kevin Nealon about his being on Letterman. He was on both the early Letterman and the later one about it. And so we met him. I think he was doing Weeds when we interviewed him. If you remember that show on Showtime. And so we went with him to his trailer, and he was shooting. So we're in the trailer waiting for him. They're like, wait in his trailer, and then you can interview him when it gets back. He comes in, and he's so funny. He's fantastic. He's a great stand-up. Or people know him from acting and Saturday Night Live, but he's a really good stand-up too. Silly and smart, like we both like. Yeah. And so we have this great interview about getting Letterman. How'd you get Letterman? He's being so funny about it. And then at the end, for the movie, the filmmakers are like, "Hey, Steve, can we just we're going to stay in. Can we just get a shot of you? Kevin's going to show you out." So they get him showing me out, of his trailer. So he's still in the trailer, and I leave, and he closes the door, and then he turns to the filmmaker and he goes, "He's not going to get on," And it's funny, it's hilarious part of the film. But on top of it, the filmmakers, who again, they know me, they were my friends. They come out and they were like cracking up, but they're like, I was like, "Oh, what's so funny?" And they didn't want to tell me because they're like, they thought, of course, I'm going to be sad about it. But he's hilarious. I mean, of course, I wasn't mad. I know he was being funny.
Yeah, it's just that's how comedians express their
exactly. Yeah. But it was so funny. They were worried. They were like, "Oh no, he made a joke," and I go, "Well, that's what we want. It's great."
Let me ask you this. I don't know if we've ever talked about this. And then we'll get back to the comedy of it. How did you?
My thing's going to change. I got to plug my thing in here.
How did you end up? Like you said, you're not a worst case scenario guy, but the diagnosis of cancer would make a lot of people just kind of go, "Okay, that's it," and just kind of roll over. What was your mind frame kind of going through that? In saying like no, and like this whole thing of like I'm going to chase instead.
Yeah, that was a process too. That's that's the thing. Goes to that. I'm glad you asked that, because it goes to that same thing about, hey, don't beat yourself up if you're not great right away, because it's a process. You got to learn it. And same thing when I got that. I'm plugging myself in here, and then I'll look at them more focused. Okay, so. The same way when I got that news, I mean, it was shattering. Like my girl, my wife was my girlfriend at the time. I had only known her 7 months at the time. Dating, like all of a sudden she's got to decide, we're both in our 30s. Is she going to stay with someone who might not be here in 5 years? Like if she wants to have kids, am I the person to be with? Like just obviously big things like we loved each other, but that's a different set of circumstances to say, I'm going to stay with you through this kind of thing.
Right.
So I remember, leaving the doctor's office when we got that, and like we had to pull the car over because like when we got the news, like, and they said 5 years, you're like, oh, you're taking it very, like clinical. On the way home, we had to pull the car over because we both just looked at each other at a stop sign and started bawling, both of us, and like hugged each other like probably for a half hour on the side of the road. It was crazy, and you bounce back in small spurts where you're like, okay, the next day all right, do whatever, and then the next day you're depressed, and so there were months where I was deep in it, and I think the project itself saved at least I don't know that it saved me. I don't want to speak that far to it, like. Because they're like, oh, laughter heals and stuff like that, and then it kind of makes it sound that the people who died didn't laugh or something.
Right.
Like it's not that. It's only, I really believe it's only luck that I'm still here, and good health coverage, obviously. But you know what I'm saying? Like, people could do the same thing I'm doing, and it's not a guarantee. But it sure gave me focus, and it made me a better, I don't know, a better person isn't the right word, but handle life better, to have a goal and to not sit at home and be depressed, which I was for months. It was very much a why me, all those stages they talk about of death, or when someone's dying or you're given a thing, the anger, depression, denial, all that kind of stuff. After a week though, my wife went back to work. All my friends who were there, who gathered around me, and it made me feel good. They all went back to work. You know what I mean? And then 2 weeks later, I was like, oh shit, I have to get back to work because I still have medical bills coming. They're skyrocketing. They're coming in. I got to pay rent. So I can't just sit around and feel sorry for myself. So the routine helped me get a little past the depression, and then having a goal like this, like okay, I'm going to turn the thing up on the Letterman. I was waiting for that to happen. Now I'm going to make it happen. That helped a little too. So I think those two things. But yeah, there was still that amount. And again, even still today, I mean, yeah, I still have bouts where I feel really down and stuff like that. And there's why me, and when I go in, I'm still dealing with, I still got to go in for scans and see an oncologist every 3 months, that kind of thing, where you, again, I'm still incredibly lucky compared to most cancer patients that my day-to-day life is pretty much like my old one. It's just, this thing hanging there that it could go wrong at any time. And that first year was bad, but since then I've been incredibly lucky. But there's still, there's ebbs and flows to it. And I think those are the two things that help me get through. Just the routine of life that we complain about often allowed me to get back away from it, because that life goes on. That was sad that life goes on, but it ended up also being good that life goes on.
Absolutely. So you go for this. I'm going to get on Letterman. And then you get the call. You're going to be on Letterman. You get there. You go through rehearsal. You're waiting in the wings behind the curtain. Take us through that for when they say, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Mazan, and you walk out to your spot and you stare out into that audience. Tell us about that. Yeah.
So it was magical. And I'm going to say the reason it's magical, you'll be able to appreciate this. For some reason that day, I don't know if it was the journey to get there or what it was, because I haven't been able to tap into it since. I was not nervous. And I don't say that in a confidence way. I'm nervous when you and I do shows together at the Madhouse. I'm nervous at still. I could go to a coffee house that doesn't matter with 2 people in it. I get nervous. You know what I mean? I want to do my best to sometimes lower the stakes. I get more nervous for some reason. I have never figured out the formula of is it what I ate that day? Is it if I took a walk? I've never figured out the thing to why is sometimes I'm nervous and I'm not. But for whatever reason that day, or at least those moments right before I went on, I was not nervous, and I still don't know why. I don't know what ends, and part of it again might have just been the journey up to it, that I felt like I already won. I got there, and that the doing it was going to be the gravy part already. But I was standing backstage. I made sure to get there early. They taped 2 shows that day. I was on the second one, and I got there and I asked Eddie Brill. I said, "Hey, can I go out and see where I'm going to stand?" And yep, so he took me out. And I stood there, and you're looking at the Ed Sullivan Theater. This is where the Beatles, played, and Elvis. And I'm standing there. It's this gorgeous theater. I'm looking out at it, and I'm running through the set in my head, kind of where I'm going to look for things and that kind of stuff. And Eddie comes up and he goes, "Okay, they're gonna. The audience is coming in. They're gonna start bringing it, so we got to go. I got to run to this thing. So I'll take you up to your dressing room." And then I remember saying to him, I go, "Can I stay? I'll find my way back to the dressing room. Is it okay if I stay? Because there's always a weirdness for me when I play somewhere I haven't played before. My first show always feels weird because it's new."
Right.
And again, it goes back to the thing we were talking about, that stage time is so useful because there's stuff like that. Even if you get used to playing one place, well, you're going to have to go on the road and play places with different sight lines and different things that you never take into account. So I basically begged him, "Can I stay here and spend 5 more minutes on the spot where I'm going to perform?" And he was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, find your way back." And he's like, "I got to go though." I'm like, "Okay." So I stayed there, ran through my set again, just took a moment to breathe in and be like, "This is my space. This is my spot. This is this little point where they want me to stand in. This is my home." So that when I came out later, I felt like I had already been there. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like the first time I had been there, So I really soaked it in. Went back up, got ready, got into all my stuff. When I come back down, if you remember on the Letterman show, Biff, his stage manager, who was part of the show a lot of times, he was backstage with me, and he had the microphone. Or actually, he didn't have the microphone because it's a lapel. But I had remembered a story that played in. This is how I remembered it, because he had the microphone, but I wasn't going to use the microphone. He had a story about this great comedian, Nick Griffin, who got bumped from the show because the guest that they had on was going well, whoever the guest was. So Nick Griffin was standing backstage, and Biff gave him the microphone and said, "Okay, you're going on in a moment." And then, like a minute later, Biff's talking to someone and is like, "Oh, okay, he's going to be bumped." Okay. And they just came up, and Nick said the way he found out he wasn't going to be on is Biff just took the microphone from him. So Biff had a microphone, and I remember being like, "Well, I'm not going to use the microphone. I'm set up with the lapel." But I just kept watching him. I was like, every time he looked like he was hearing something in his headset, I was like, And the guest that was on before me was Doogie Howser, Neil Patrick Harris, who at that time was doing How I Met Your Mother. And he was killing it. That was the only thing. Like, it didn't make me nervous, but I in my head I was like, "Hey, back off a little bit. I got to follow this, Yeah. But of course, it was great. It was almost like a warm up act because they were in a good mood already. They were already laughing. And then they went to break, but he kept doing well. They did extend him, so I thought I was going to get bumped, but there was a band on after me too. So, and I knew I'd be bumped before the band because it's much easier to reschedule one person than a whole band that has their stuff there. So, eventually, no one says anything, and he says goodnight to Neil Patrick Harris, and they go to commercial, and Neil Patrick Harris comes backstage, and he sees me, and I said, "Oh, really funny." He goes, "Oh, are you the comedian?" And he talked, and he goes, "Kill it out there." He said some nice words, and I look back at Biff, and he was still just waiting there. So I was like, "Oh, I think we're doing this." And then all of a sudden, you hear Dave come back, and Eddie Brill had told me this thing. He goes, "What do you want your intro to be?" And the first club that ever headlined me was Wise Guys in Utah. And I just happened to be going back there soon after. So I said, "Hey, will you mention that I'm going to be at Wise Guys in Utah?" And then Eddie goes, "Do you have another place?" He goes, "Dave is just going to, I just know Dave, and he's going to laugh when he says Wise Guys Comedy Club." Like, and I go, "Well, that's, they took care of me. They're the ones I want to help here. So no, I want it to be Wise Guys." And he goes, "Okay, no problem." Sure enough, Dave he goes, "Our next comedian, you can catch him at Wise Guys Comedy Club." Mafia Reddit. And he went on for like a minute making fun of Wise Guys Comedy Club, and then finally brought me out. But it kind of, I was cracking up, so it took me out of my head for a second. Then walked out, did it, and it was amazing. It was everything I could have, sometimes moments don't live up to what you want them to be, and that one did. And I actually thought in one of my, the great thing about comedy is how much can go through your mind at once. Mm-hmm. You're thinking about the joke you're telling, how you're delivering it. Don't forget to do the eyebrow. Don't forget to turn a little. Yeah. You think about how the last joke is at the same time, how the last joke didn't do as well as you thought it was going to do. You're thinking about the next joke. Make sure, don't forget when you get to that. Like all that at the same time. So I'm on stage. I remember hearing Paul Schaefer laugh. I remember hearing Dave laugh at a couple times. And so that's in my head. And then I started thinking, I was like, the whole 5 years of my life of chasing this dream came to me. And I was like, just keep going. What are they going to do? don't stop. Like don't say, because they say, what's the last word of your joke? So they know the band kicks in when you say your last word. I was like, just don't say that word. Just start telling other jokes. What can they do? Like that was going into my head. And then all of a sudden I start thinking, you're on TV, idiots. Get out of your head. Get out of your joke. Like you're going to screw up the joke because you're thinking about this too much. You know?
Yep.
So all that was going through my head at the same time. And I obviously did not break the rules. I finished it up. And that's when you get to meet Dave. You don't meet him before the show. So after I finished, like I was like, and I took a deep breath and I'm enjoying and people were applauding. And then I was like, oh, Dave's coming up behind me. So if you watch if you watch the set on YouTube, you put Steve Mazan Letterman, you can watch the set and you can see how excited I am when Dave walks up behind me. I'm like, I look like a little 5-year-old. I'm like, I'm so excited because I had never thought, like, of course, now you're done. You're going to get to meet Dave. It was awesome.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, if they want to check that out, go on YouTube, Steve Mazan Letterman. Follow you on Instagram at Steve Mazan, Twitter at Steve_Mazan. You also have a Dry Bar comedy special out, which they can check out on Dry Bar. I think it's drybarcomedy.com.
Comedy, yeah.
And we'll check that out. Let's now. I just want to touch really quickly. You won an Emmy for writing. Like, do you throw that in Gary's face at all? just like, hey Gary, look at this.
I'm kind of it feels weird to me to have it. I'll be honest. Like I don't keep it out. People are always like, why don't you have that at your front door? Why don't you have it on your hood ornament on your car, kind of thing. And listen, in a different circumstance, I might. I won that Emmy. I wasn't even at Ellen anymore when we won the Emmy. So first of all, it wasn't just me; it was the writing staff. But I have an Emmy with my name on it, so I won an Emmy. But it wasn't like, you know whose writing we like on the Ellen DeGeneres Show? Steve Mazan. He's the best. You know, like,
right?
Like it wasn't. They gave it to me and no one else. So it's all
the collective. Yeah.
Yes, a collective Emmy. So it was part of a team. And like I said, someone called me up because I wasn't at the show anymore when they won. So someone called me up and was like, "Hey, you know, you just won an Emmy," and I was like, "What?" You know. So it feels different to me. Had I got to do a Cuba Gooding Jr. moment where a star handed me the Emmy, I might be a little more cocky about it. But it feels a little different. I'm very, very proud of it. But it doesn't feel like a show off one to me.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about kind of what it was like writing for Ellen. Just any final thoughts of that experience on Ellen?
Yeah, just again, it was different. It's a different thing. I was the only stand-up comedian that was writing for her. Yeah, it was. The rest were all writers.
How did you get the gig?
So it's funny. Here's another thing that's good advice to young comedians: be bold. Be bold. I think if fortune favors the bold. I think that someone smarter than me said that. Being a clean comedian, I had that reputation. I had a friend of a friend who worked for the show, and then another one of my friends ended up being Ellen's assistant. Some guy I started with in the Bay Area. So this is another good thing. This is just like you said: get a group of friends and always make new friends. It's a very, from the outside, sometimes it looks like comedians hate other comedians. I don't understand those people who don't like other comedians. We're all in the same boat. Like, no one else can share the misery that we all have together. Why would you ever be mean to another comedian? I don't get it. So they were looking. I think they had a revolving door of writers going through, and so my friend heard about that, and he just knowing that I was a clean comedian, and I think in the angle of Ellen, observational, friendly comedy, he said, "Hey, they're looking. I'll put you in touch with the head writer." And he said, "This is what they're looking for." I remember it was like you had to do 3 monologues, a couple sketch ideas, and then some other like stuff that you would do on the street kind of thing. And so I sent in my stuff. The head writer got back to me. He goes, "Oh my God." He goes, "I love it. I love it. I love your stuff. The stuff you wrote is really great. but we just hired someone. And I was like, and like I said, I knew they had a revolving door. And so I wrote back. I figured I had nothing to lose at this point. So I wrote back and I said, oh, great. And I said, great. I'm going to send you a new monologue every week until you hire me. And he wrote back and said, I love this idea. And 2 weeks later, I had sent him 2 monologues in the meantime. 2 weeks later, they got rid of that writer and hired me.
Wow.
So again, I'm not that kind of usual bold person, but it is the thing, like I was talking about, like that we live in more of a share your dream society now than we did 20 years ago. People aren't afraid as much to say the crazy dream they have in their head. And I think that's a good thing. That's a nice thing about the world now, is that we're in that. But I think being bold in those moments like that, again, don't be a dick. Some people mistake that. But again, if you know you can deliver, then it's good to be bold in those moments. Like, separate yourself from the other people. Think about that. Like, there's you and I especially. We're white guy comics. There's thousands of us. You know, you're fantastic at it. That's what separates you. The impressions. People know, like, impressions, Brian. You know what I mean? That separates you from 99.9% of other comedians. So I think those moments of where you can find a time to be bold, that was it. I knew that if I sent that to this guy, he had never had anyone else say, I'm going to give you more than you want. You know, like, I'm going to, even though you didn't hire me, I'm going to send you more monologues. And that's what made him remember me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Well, let's switch real quickly into you have an organization that you like to help promote. They're doing a lot of really good things, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it. It's called Say Yes to Hope.
Say Yes to Hope. So yes, I've been lucky through this cancer journey to meet so many other survivors that hear the story that I had with David Letterman and my cancer story. To meet great organizations, great people, and one of the greatest is a woman I met very early on. Her name is Suzanne Lindley, Lindley, and she started this organization called Say Yes to Hope, and they help other people who get diagnosed with cancer cope with it. You know, there's so much stuff when you know, the Suzanne Komen. I'm not trashing any of these other things, but you know what I mean. Right. We're creating, you know, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, that kind of thing, and I'm not trashing any of that. That's great. But we're all aware of breast cancer. You don't have to tell, like, I don't know what the awareness is anymore. Is there anyone that doesn't know about breast cancer?
Right.
It's out there. Research, you know, money, great. Send money to research. But there's also people that day to day just need some help coping with it. Like, again, those months when I first got diagnosed, there's plenty of literature at the oncologist that you can pick up a brochure, but it's a piece of paper you got to read. And there's things. To have someone that can talk to you is so valuable, and that's what Suzanne Lindley has kind of started. There's a website you can go to, so you can just, if you're a shy person, just get the information. But there's also someone they'll talk to you about it, and she has groups. They meet across the country. They go to Washington to lobby for more cancer stuff, and for the rare types of cancers that aren't getting enough attention, and for healthcare stuff. So she's luckily someone I've met along the way that's like a living angel. She's like one of these people that you're just like, oh my God, I'm an awful person. If this is an example of what a good person is. And just, you know, I thought I was good until I met this person. She's the kind of person where you're just like, oh my God. So yeah, she does incredible stuff for cancer, people going through cancer, survivors, all that kind of stuff, and their families. And she's amazing. So that's her organization. Yeah, you can find more about it at sayyesToHope.org.
SayYesToHope.org. And I almost forgot to ask you this question. We're going to go back to comedy real quick. And I know we're getting kind of long here. You got a chance to meet, I could talk comedy forever. You got a chance to meet Robin Williams. He came to your premiere or not premiere, but he came to one of your showings of Dying to Do Letterman. And I mean, Robin Williams is, you know, one of the greats of the greats of the greats. So just, if you want to just talk about that really quickly. Yeah.
So so from the story earlier, I started comedy in San Francisco. So I have so many ties to the Bay Area. I go back and work the clubs often. And there's a great, Robin lived up there. You know, he would split time, even though he was a big movie star, he would split time and still live in San Francisco where he started comedy and grew up. And so you would see him out at open mics and stuff. He would show up. He would be doing a show at a bar that's terrible. And all of a sudden you'd be looking out. I remember one time looking out and seeing Lee Levine, our friends Lee Levine and Gary Cannon, looking at me dying on stage, and there was 5 people half paying attention to the bar. And in the back door that I could see from the stage, Robin Williams walked in, and he looked around, and it was terrible. So he walked back out, but he would just show up, and he was this huge star, and he didn't have an entourage or anything like that. He would just pop up times. And so I got to meet him, probably a dozen different times over the years. But one of the special times was we were showing Dying to Do Letterman before it kind of, went out there. It was on the film festival circuit, and we shared it at a theater called the Throckmorton, which if you're ever near Marin, go to the Throckmorton. It's one of the great community theaters across the country. And they would do a comedy show there as well that Mark Pitta and friends ran. And then Lucy Mercer organizes it. She allowed me to show Dying to Do Letterman there as well when we were kind of bringing it out to the public. And we're showing it. And all of a sudden I was in the green room because I had seen the movie. And there all of a sudden was a little buzz. They're like, oh, my God, Robin's here. I'm like, what? I'm like, Robin's here. And Robin showed up and watched the movie. Like he lived in Marin, and he just showed up and watched the movie, and then he came in the green room afterwards and we talked, and he raved about the movie. And again, it just, if you would have told 12-year-old Steve Mazan that you'd be talking to Robin Williams about a movie you made and that he came to watch, like my head would have exploded. It was so surreal, and he was such a gentle human being, obviously incredibly troubled and had his demons, but one of those guys, I had heard this growing up. Don't meet your heroes. Don't meet your heroes. And now you don't even have to meet them just because they're, you see stupid things like someone you like, and then you see on social media or something, or some action caught. I was lucky to meet 2 of my heroes, Walter Payton, who I mentioned at the beginning, and then Robin Williams. And he couldn't have been, he improved whatever I thought about him. He was just the most gentle person I've ever met. I mean, that what you see of him in like Good Will Hunting, like that he's tapping into, that was the real Robin. It wasn't the manic crazy guy on stage. I mean, he could pull that out at any point, but it was just you could have a real conversation with him very quickly. You know it is when you meet someone new, it always feels awkward, but he just had a magic about him where he could take that away despite him being a huge star. And so, one of the great moments of my life is him showing up in that green room and saying how much he loved the movie. And I remember him like loving Denise, my wife. He's like, oh my God, she's a comedy wife. She's like a snake. He meant it like she's strong and she's powerful. It's like, don't get in the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very, very awesome. What a great moment. Yeah.
Awesome story. And
on YouTube, you can see the moment. Someone videotaped it. Like,
very cool. So
if you put Ron Williams, Steve Mazan, Letterman, Dying to Do Letterman, something like that, it's on there somewhere.
That's awesome. And Steve, I want to thank the viewers and listeners for tuning in. Want to thank you so much for being on here. Definitely check out sayyestohope.org. Wonderful organization. Yes. And again, if you want to follow Steve, check him out, stevemazan.com, Steve Mazan on Instagram, and Steve_Mazan on Twitter. And thank you so much, dude, for coming out. Let's do this again.
Yeah, thanks. I could talk comedy, and I could talk to you forever. You're one of my great comedy friends. So thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Love having you. And we'll do this again, and we'll get a little group with Gary and Lee, and we'll just explore some stories. So thanks again, man, and I will talk to you real soon.
Okay, thanks, buddy.